Good afternoon, Jill. How you feeling?
Well, I'm glad to see you as always. You're such a light and bring so much joy when you arrive places and when you show up. So I'm happy to be with you.
Thank you so much. You too. Your story is absolutely amazing. We could talk about 1,000 things. For example, you meditating for like 60 years straight
Oh,
and
no, 30.
30 years. Okay. But you've been doing yoga. You've been doing yoga for a long time.
For 60 years.
Oh, but like
For 63 years.
63 years of yoga, but intensive 10-day silent retreats over 30 times.
I've probably done like 15, 20 sits and 15, 20 serves. So I've
Okay.
sat and I've served. So, and there was a long period of time when I didn't, during my marriage, I didn't sit or serve. So only once. And so yes, but it's a big part of my life, I would say. I would say that meditation is important.
Yeah, and you brought up your marriage. What we're going to talk about today is your husband was a genius who invented a technology that where you will not need to use any kind of electricity to heat up your house or keep your house cool. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Yeah, the
Okay.
gravity geothermal envelope was his first invention, but that is the shoulders upon which the new invention stands. And so what happened is, um, in the 1950s, Buckminster Fuller, my husband was a bit older than me, but in the 1950s, Buckminster Fuller, the great engineer and also genius and physicist and philosopher, was teaching at the University of Illinois in Urbana. And Bucky is the person who invented the buckyballs. He invented, which is a physics thing. He invented the Dymaxion car and the geodesic dome, which many people are familiar with the dome houses and dome buildings. The geodesic dome was famous in Montreal in the 1960s at the World Expo. But Bucky was quite in, there's whole organizations after Buckminster Fuller today. And he was one of Lee's teachers at the University of North Carolina, at NC State, North Carolina State University in Raleigh, was Warner Shergren, and Warner was a student of Buckminster Fuller. So that's a little bit of the lineage. And Buckminster Fuller taught at University of Illinois, and he taught his students something called the world game. And in that era, scientists had knowledge and record of the world's resources and what they were. And there were, they had statistics and all of this stuff. And no matter how one played the world game, no matter how you played the world game, all of the Earth's resources are depleted. And this was quite shocking. And, shortly thereafter, Rachel Carson wrote the book, The Silent Spring, and people were becoming aware of pollution and that we were systematically and slowly destroying our Earth. But when Bucky's students came up with this horrifying answer to the world game, that all the Earth's resources get depleted, Bucky said no. He said, there's something divine within the human being that will prevent that from happening. And he charged all of his students to find that out, to figure out how to prevent this disaster from happening. And my husband, as a student of one of his students, Lee, felt that Bucky was his most important teacher. He said, beyond Buddha, beyond Jesus, beyond anyone, Bucky was his most important teacher. He read all his books, The Critical Path, all of Bucky's books. And he hung on every word of Buckminster Fuller. And he took it upon himself to figure out how to solve that problem. And that's what I have to share with you, is his answer to that problem, and as well charge everyone who's listening with the ability to make that happen. So we can all do this, because we have that divine spark that Bucky talked about. And now we've been shown the way because Lee figured it out, and now we can enact it, and then we can do this.
That's a beautiful thing. I know about Buckminster. I never heard that he had that view, but it's true. If you think of us as having like a collective mind, you know, when the problem shows up, and us being part of the earth, when the problem shows up, the solution is just going to drop into someone's consciousness who's open to it, and that happens to be your husband. And so how did he figure this out? How did he figure out a way to remove the need for heating and air conditioning?
So it's a lovely story, another wonderful story. And, you know, there's a lot of you're a Buddhist, and there's a lot of lovely stories around the Buddha, and great stories, of which I know many. And there are stories around this invention as well, which is significant. So what happened is, as a student at NC State, Lee had a big family. He had 6 kids at one point. At one point, he had 7. I think one died in a crib birth. But he had these kids, and he and his wife, they moved to land that his father had left for him in the middle of nowhere, West Tennessee, after he finished studying at NC State, and Butler Lake in Meaden, West Tennessee. And he embarked upon building a 10,000 square foot house with an indoor swimming pool, with a 40-foot high greenhouse. And he wanted to utilize the principles that he learned while studying architecture. And he wanted to utilize those principles of passive solar, for the most part, was what he was doing. And so this was the house in this picture here. This was the 10,000 square foot house right there in the woods of Meaden, Tennessee. See the indoor swimming pool right here. And this is the peak of the greenhouse here. Here's a picture of the greenhouse.
Wow.
And here is how the invention is going to work. And here's the living room. And here's Gatlinburg, Tennessee, which he designed, the village, which I just was at and showed you pictures, made a movie of that. But anyway, so what happened is he built this home, 10,000 square feet, which is significant. And in that era was significant. Here in Palm Beach, it's nothing. People are building these 40,000 square, they're knocking down 10,000 square foot houses to build 40,000 square foot houses for some old man and old lady to live in by themselves.
Crazy.
It's hilarious. But in any event, the 2 months out of the year, or 2 weeks out of the year.
Right.
So he built this house with the intention. His brother had voted for Richard Nixon, and he was so dismayed about this and so upset that he thought that the world was coming apart. So he was going to move into the woods on this property and disconnect from society. And he had bags of grains and bags of rice, and he was going to live out there for the rest of his life, he thought, and that was going to be it. So anyway, after building the house, there was an ice storm, and it was January, and the ice storm took out all the power for 2 weeks in this small place in the middle of nowhere. And the French doors from the bedrooms opened up into the greenhouse. Here's the greenhouse on the cover of the book. This is where the French door, that's a reflection. And the French doors opened out into that greenhouse, excuse me. And he opened the door one morning at 6 in the morning into the greenhouse. and it was freezing outside. The icicles were dropping you could hear the ice dropping, the icicles dropping, and you could see the snow and the ice everywhere on the branches. And he opens the door into this greenhouse, and he's hit with this whoosh of hot air. And he realizes that if he understood the principles governing that whoosh of hot air, that he would have discovered something profound for humanity. So he ran and he got a thermometer and he measured that it was over 85 degrees. And, and he found that quite astounding, that in the greenhouse, it was keeping a temperature of 85 degrees, but outside it was freezing cold. So for the next 2 years, he thought about it and tried to figure this out. All this while, he was working for a builder in the South, and he was building shopping malls and beautiful houses. I'll show you some examples of some of the beautiful houses that he built before discovering the envelope. So he built traditional antebellum mansions like that. And he built traditional English homes like that. And
This is your husband or his friend?
my husband.
Oh,
Yeah,
so he was an architect by
yeah,
trade.
he was an architect, and he built beautiful houses
Mm,
all over the South
very nice.
that were traditional. And he also built sort of mid-century modern homes throughout Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, where he went to school. So he had built a whole series of homes which are on tours today in Raleigh, Durham, that are called the Triangle Modernist Homes. So there was a group of architects who went to NC State, whose buildings are on tour in Raleigh today. And Lee has a number of those homes that are on the tours that they take in Raleigh, Durham. One of the houses he built was his own home, which he built in a record 2 months, I think, or 6 weeks. And it was 5,000 square feet. And it was in the 1960s. And he paid his workers, I want to say $1 a day, $1 an hour to work on these houses in that era. And he gave them all a bonus if they finished early. And they all finished early. Uh-oh, I lost you. I don't know how that happened.
Oh, I'm still here.
It just went away.
You don't see me anymore?
No, maybe we should turn it off for a minute. Oh, because a phone call came in. Sorry.
You back? Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, so for the next 2 years, he thought about this, and being the genius person that he was, it perplexed him. But he was always thinking. He was a scientist and a philosopher and a thinker, and it perplexed him. Aside from being this brilliant architect with incredible skills at drawing, beautiful drawings, amazing drawings, and still working for this contractor and designing these shopping malls. And then the guy goes belly up, and Lee still has 15 mouths to feed because he has all these employees and his own family and his brother and his family who were working for him. And he didn't know what to do. And so he went into the woods and he took 2 hits of acid.
Okay.
He lay under a tree and he put his arms like this and he looked up at the tree and he said to the tree, "Why is it so easy for you and so difficult for mankind? You just lay there and you just stand there and all your resources come to you. You don't have to do anything. Your resources all come to you. And mankind has to go fight a war just to get his resources, to turn his electric on and get his toast toasting." And within a second, the answer came to him. And he jumped up and he ran in the house and he drew a drawing. And the drawing was in a circular form at that time. And what it essentially is his invention of the gravity geothermal envelope. And it's how he figured out how his house was working. And on page 11 of his book, right here, it describes it. So if you notice, this is the earth, the ground line right here.
Mm-hmm.
And all here below here is the earth. And down here where the basement is the permafrost level. So the permafrost, below the permafrost level in any place in the world, the temperature stays constant. So in New York, it might be 60 degrees. In Montana, it might be 55. You know, it's different, but constant. Wherever it is globally, it's constant.
So it stays warmer in the winters. It doesn't get as cold as above it, you're saying.
Right. It
Okay.
stays right. So it's never changes. So if
Mm-hmm.
it's 60 degrees in the winter, it's 60 degrees in the summer.
Interesting.
And that's constant throughout the earth. No matter where you are on the earth, below the permafrost level, it stays exactly the same temperature.
Interesting.
So what Lee did is he creates an envelope of air to circulate around his house. And that circulates a blanket of warm air around the house. I'll read to you.
Oh, so okay.
The Ecosia house has been described as a double shell design or a house within a house in a conventional house. The walls, floors, and ceilings are exposed directly to the extremes of the outside climate. In the Ecosia house, the gravity geothermal envelope is created by separating the interior surfaces from the exterior surfaces with a protective blanket of constantly circulating earth-heated air. The interior walls and other surfaces are thereby isolated from the extremes of the outside climate. The house, quote, thinks it is underground, since the ground temperature remains stable a few feet down and is only a few degrees below the temperature required for human comfort. The heat generated by the lights, the people, and the living processes is sufficient to maintain comfortable interior conditions 90% of the time. During the other 10% or most extreme conditions, a fire in the fireplace or a couple of bathroom-sized heaters are sufficient to make up the additional heat loss.
Wow. So it's almost like a greenhouse, right? It sounds
Not really. I mean, he couples his homes with a greenhouse. So for example,
okay.
this house utilizes a greenhouse. Depending
Wow.
on where the house is, he usually has in this case in New York, it has a south-facing greenhouse. However, depending on where it is on the earth would require different things. Some places are hot and they require a different type of system. But for example, this house in Lake Tahoe has never had a heating bill for heating or cooling.
Okay, so this house in Lake Tahoe, they used his technology.
These were the first 23 houses that he got. All right, so let me explain what happened historically. So in the 1970s, when he invented this, a small supermarket magazine that they used to sell at, the grocery checkout lines was called Hudson Home Builders. It was a builder's little magazine. It was a throwaway rag kind of thing. But it would say, build your house this way and give you construction ideas and that kind of thing. And that little magazine had an article about Lee's house. And from that little magazine at the supermarket checkout lines, Lee got thousands of inquiries because there was a gas crisis and people were lined up at the gas pump in the 1970s believing that we were running out of fossil fuels. And I don't know if you know about that historically, but it happened in
I heard
America.
about it, yeah.
And as a result of which, people were interested in finding ways to conserve fossil fuels and to not use them. And that was kind of the beginning of it. And so what Lee did is he picked 23 locations in America that were well known, places that had some sort of value of name, like Newport, Rhode Island, Aspen, Colorado, San Francisco, New Orleans, so that they were places of note. In those 23 locations, he designed homes for the people that contacted him there.
Wow.
And that's a climatological map. And on the climatological map, utilizing that, there's Tucson, Charleston, Jacksonville, Sacramento, New Orleans. These are the places where
So
he,
all of these places don't have heat and cooling bills?
yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they may, well, this is, again, you've got to think this is now 40, 50 years ago that this happened.
Hmm.
And, almost 50 years ago. And some of those houses have been sold, some have been torn down, some have been, most of them do not probably have the same owners that were living in them 50 years ago. And in many, I mean, it used to break my heart when I'd hear about them being torn down or something like that, because they're like tearing down a Frank Lloyd Wright house.
Well,
It's
to
like,
buy a house like that, you must know that what it is, and they don't even advertise it. It was just like people died.
what happened is that I'll explain historically what happened. So this was in the 1970s. Then what happened is Lee went to University of California, Berkeley, and he taught his invention at the University of California, Berkeley in the Graduate School of Design and Planning. He was flying high. And in addition, he was on the cover of Popular Science, Better Homes and Gardens, House Beautiful. He was on newscasts. He was all over the world speaking, all over America at passive solar conferences. He was debating nuclear physicists about how his buildings worked. He was asked to speak where Sir Isaac Newton delivered the laws of gravity. This is a very small club of people.
Hmm.
And so, and professors were writing books about his work. And so what happened then is this was all during Jimmy Carter, the administration of our president, Jimmy Carter, who was an advocate for this kind of work. Jimmy was a farmer and Lee was a farmer. And so farmers understand very practical things. And Lee was wholly practical. I say you can't fool a farmer. And when Ronald Reagan became president, when our actor became president, the first thing that he did was he took the solar panels that Lee's friend put on the White House off the White House. Many people don't know that there were solar panels on the White House in the 1970s, and that the first thing Ronald Reagan did as president was have them removed. And he also destroyed the careers of every solar and energy pioneer in America, because Americans were led, and then the world was led, to believe that anything environmental or solar was, quote, too expensive.
Hmm.
So Lee used to say, what's too expensive? Spending 10% more on building your double
Right.
wall, or sending your child to war to go fight to get skills that you need, and possibly losing your child. So
So, so,
what's the expense?
so go back to how this technology works. So I understand. I have a quick question. Can you have a window? You said it's a house within a house.
Of course, there's windows that have double windows, double pane windows they weren't around in that day, but double pane windows work that way. So how it works is hot air rises and cold air falls.
Right.
He used to argue this with nuclear physicists, believe it or not. But anyway, hot air rises and cold air falls. So what happens in this house is this is the air from here. If it's 30 degrees below zero or 30 degrees outside,
Right.
this under here is 60 degrees. This 60-degree air is rising up here. the hot air rises and the cold air is pushing it around in a circle. So it becomes a natural gravity geothermal convection loop of
Gotcha.
warm air that's circulating, including the greenhouse, around this house.
Wow.
When you couple that with a south-facing window in New York, greenhouse, a south-facing greenhouse, as this house has, as most of Lee's houses had, depends on where they are, a south-facing greenhouse, you have a nice blanketed, warm, hot, warm building that maintains warmth, even if it's freezing outside.
So it's almost like you said, a house within a house, almost like a tunnel system going around.
An envelope, he calls it the gravity geothermal
Envelope.
envelope. An
And it seems like such a simple concept. You would think that has are there any ancient structures from ancient civilizations that use this? Did he discover afterwards that some other culture has been using it?
I would guess there are, and he did utilize the cooling system he got from the Persians. The Persians could actually make ice in the desert 3,000 years ago. And he had read an article, I think, in Scientific American about that. And there's
Wow.
something that he utilizes in the cooling system, which is called a solar chimney.
Yeah, how does that work? How do you cool Florida heat off without an air conditioning?
Because below ground also there's a constant temperature, and it's an equation that is called a solar chimney, or it's also called, there's another name for it, but you would have a cooling tube under the ground, and that equation has to do with how big your home is, how big the building is, and that would be how big the tube is and how long the tube is, and that would vent that cool air into your home. So that's a little different technology, but is utilized within the same structure. So you can utilize the cooling tube within the same structure, the solar chimney. It's vented out.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
So he did build some of those in Florida and hot places,
Yes, in Jacksonville.
and it really and what about the humidity? It doesn't matter.
Humidity was a problem, and there are techniques to mitigate that. But
Wow.
what happened is that all of these first level designs, which were studied by Brookhaven National Laboratories, the Brookhaven National Laboratories, which is the EPA, the environmental, I mean, the national, what's the organization in America, the EPA?
Yeah, Environmental Protection Agency.
Yeah, well, whatever, the environmental organization is in America, monitored these homes,
Mhm.
discovered them to be the most energy efficient houses. This is the data collected by American Institute of Architects and Brookhaven National Laboratories. And that's our government collected this data. And they discovered these houses to be the most energy efficient houses that they'd ever looked at. And
Wow.
so it's quite shocking and sad to think that this was put underground for all of these years. But the government successfully did that, and they made people like Lee go underground. And there were consequences for people who were thinking outside the box.
Right,
And
of course. Still are.
yeah,
But having said that, let's say someone has 30 acres of land and they love your idea. How does it work? They contact you, and then you have is there an architect that that knows Lee how to really? Okay.
but we don't want to, I want to explain further, because Lee was done with this in
Okay.
1980. He was finished. He was on to the next.
Hmm.
So there's an extrapolation of this. The gravity geothermal envelope is the shoulders upon which his new work stands.
Oh, so there's something better and upgraded.
Better. Yes, there's
Well,
an upgrade. The final iteration of his work, which is what we together did. It's called Ekotecture. So I'm going to explain the derivation of ecosia homes, the word. So Lee was trying to think of a word that would be ecological to describe what he had invented. And they were toying with all kinds of words. And they had a friend who was a Greek sculptor. And the word ekoscheia in ancient Greece means the essence of being. And Lee describes the essence of being as family, food, and shelter.
Hmm.
And so that is how he named this book. When Lee and I went to do Ekotecture, which is the iteration I want to explain to you today, we spent a lot of time struggling with the words, what words we would use to describe all of this. And we came up with Ekotecture spelled with a K, Ekotecture.
Hmm.
Like ecosia homes, ecosia homes. And the E stands for the environment, ecology, all of that. The K in this case stands for the arcs, which will save humanity. And Lee died 18 years ago, before the words climate change were in our vernacular. But what we were designing were arcs. Arcs, and I'll explain that further. The O is for the oceans upon which they sit, and texture, like architecture, the texture of the earth, the way you build, et cetera, et cetera. So Ekotecture is essential architecture. It's architecture that is completely self-sustainable. It takes care of all of your lights, gas, water, waste management, and food production. It takes care of protecting life, no matter what the external conditions, earthquake, flood, fire, hurricane. Lee thought of it all because he said for 10,000 years, people have been building without considering that. They haven't thought about the forces of nature that might destroy your home. And so he invented a way to live in harmony with the earth, buildings that take nothing from the earth, air, or water in their operation, and take nothing from the earth, air, or put nothing into the earth, air, or water in their operation. So these buildings are completely self-sustainable. And my vision statement, which I've written for Ekotecture, is, I took from the Henry Ford. When I read Henry Ford's vision statement for Ford Motor Company, it's a Ford in every garage, a car in every garage. And I say an eco arc for every family on earth. We can build for all 8 billion people that live on our planet, and we can allow them all to live in safety and in comfort with all of their resources taken care of without harming the earth. We can house all of us and utilizing this technology. So I'll explain that to you.
Yeah, what is the difference between the gravity one and this one? You said it has ocean, and I think I see it in the picture. There's some water underneath it. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll explain it to you. So I need a pointer. So this right here is the structure. So it's similar to the Buckminster Fuller geodesic dome, only it's elliptical in shape. And that's a physics thing that we can discuss later as well. But the shape of the new buildings are all elliptical. And I'll explain a spiritual concept about that, because one time I was telling the head of the Red Nation, Joe Ironeagle, about this. And I told him that all the structures are elliptical, and he told me it's a kiva, which is a sacred ceremonial space for Native people. And he said, Jill, the spirits can't get trapped in the corners. And my husband used to say he would never build another building like this again in his life.
Mm-hmm.
He said they're all right angles, and right angles means right angle thinking. And
Right.
he said he said, it's all about the boobs and the butts. And he said, nature is like that. Nature is like that. Nature is not about the right angles. And so these buildings are all elliptical, but they also, that is also useful if a hurricane comes or if a tornado comes.
Right.
Because you have shear, you have the wind, the wind will just
Wow.
over it instead of destroying it. And
Wow. So that's what's the material for the top of that?
well, this has been something I've been figuring out on my own for all of these 32 years, no, for the last 18 years. Lee left me a prescription for everything. I have it over here. And that prescription, which is written here,
Whoa.
yeah, which I can share with you later.
Mhm.
It explains what the materials must be. So he would never use wood again as a structural material and never use steel again. And I've had big arguments with my materials people about that because steel is so traditionally used as a structural material. But there's a man online that I listen to named Dan Winters, and he's a physicist.
I
And
know,
he,
Dan. Yeah, he's great. And
yeah,
it's funny that because when you said about having no like right angles, I've heard him talk exactly about that.
exactly. So
Bad for
Dan,
your health.
yeah, exactly. Dan talks about the health benefit. He also says you can't have a round structure. Dan also is not a proponent of the geodesic dome because there's a reason, a physics reason why you should not have a round structure. So Lee was on to this. He was on to this before all of these people. He knew what he was talking about. This Dan also speaks about why not to use steel, how bad steel is for us. So my husband used to say to me, he used to say, Jill, there's only two things that kill people. And I'd say, what's that? He goes, judgment and the buildings we live in. He said, everything about the buildings we live in, the way we get our electricity, the materials that they're made of, we are sick. Every building on earth that we are living in is causing our illnesses. And
Wow.
so his new buildings are used with natural materials. And while I was in Gainesville last week in Alachua, I met a man, a builder, who met Lee and me 25 years ago. We explained to him this whole system, and he's been building for all these years. And recently he's discovered this material, a natural material, a rock called basalt. And that is going to be the structural material for all of these buildings. And basalt can actually comes in these strands as well as coming in a granular form and coming in other forms, but we can extrude it so that the plan is to extrude these buildings. And in 1992, I presented this to the United States Department of Defense to retool the shipbuilding facilities in Charleston, South Carolina, to build these eco arcs because the US Navy was retiring their shipbuilding facility in Charleston, South Carolina. And the joint heads that I spoke with, he said, Jill, he said, do you know how long it takes an oil tanker to turn once you start the turn? And I said, no. And he said, 27 miles. And that's how long it's going to take you to get this thing going. Well, 32 years later, I'm still working, saying nothing different than I said 32 years ago. I've never changed what I said. So, but I will tell you about how this works.
Okay.
So if you notice that blue line there, that is, so think of it as a boat and think of the basement as the hull of the boat.
Okay.
So the house is basically a boat, or not just a house. This could be an entire city. This could
Wow.
be a mega city. It could be one house, 10 houses, 100 houses, 1,000,000 houses. It could be whatever. So the floating foundation. So this is your water, and that water could be the water of the ocean, of your lakes, of your ponds, of your estuary, of your rivers, whatever. But it also can be a water jacket that sits on land on your property in Colorado, or that sits in your landlocked nation like Burma, or whatever, you know? And so this is a water jacket. So it's like making a moat for your house. It's kind of like having your own personal moat around your house.
Okay.
So this bottom part here, the hull of your boat, the hull of your house is the base of your house. Your entire utility structure, your entire utilities are in the hull of your boat right now. So at the present time, and I will show you a graph, I forgot to pull it out, but I have it somewhere that we made. Right now, we have umbilical cords going from this house that I'm sitting in, this apartment, to the utility plant. So we have our sewer pipe, we have our electrical wires, we have our water coming in. So we have all kinds of umbilical cords that are going to the nipple elsewhere. And we're getting all of our resources from the electrical plant, from the sewage. We're getting rid of our waste to the sewage plant, and we're getting our water from the local utilities, right? This house doesn't require any of that. It's completely independent. So whereby this was still dependent on it, this is completely disconnected from the utility grid, 100% disconnected.
How is that possible? There's like solar panels like curved around the top and
Yeah,
stuff?
there are nowadays you can get film for your windows that is solar panels. There are roadways that have solar panels in the roadways so that they light up and say deer crossing or whatever.
And what about the removing of the waste?
So the waste is a useful product. So instead of removing the waste, we're utilizing the waste as a useful product.
Oh, for composting.
For liquid fertilizer, it's turned into a fertilizer for your garden. It has to be amended, but it also can be utilized to make methane gas for your cooking, for your stove.
Oh yeah, I know someone who's doing that. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
You know Jim Gale? Did you know
I
Jim?
do. I wanted to meet him up in Gainesville, but
I can introduce you. No, he's in Orlando, St. Cloud.
I would like to do that. We'll go visit him sometime when you're back.
Absolutely. He'd love to
Yeah.
meet you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm my friend Johnny is a big Jim Gale guy. He's on the Kennedy campaign with me. And so yeah, and so he's worked with Jim. So isn't that funny? The other day Tanya was here and she's a feng shui master, and I was like complaining about the right angles. I was telling her about Lee's work, and she said, just put some ribbons in your corner. That'll take care of those right angles. And I found a ribbon and I stuck it in the corner there this morning. But anyway, so regarding.
So we got you're saying it's completely self-sustaining. So if I get 30 acres of land and you have to obviously dig and put the water in there, but then you could just plop a bunch of these homes down or one big home?
Oh, yeah, either way. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And so what happens is in the hull of the boat. All right, so let me show you this. So I had an architect some years ago design these for me, and he was not willing to go with the elliptical shape. He said,
Oh, I was going to say.
Yeah, he said humans weren't ready for that. So I let him do what he wanted, and he built hexagonal buildings. They're, entry. There's slow ways to get people into things. There's reasons why no one is living in Buckminster Fuller geodesic domes. So maybe we have to go slowly. And since he was helping me, I was okay. Whatever you want to do, go ahead. So these are hexes, which is also, the tanks are all hexes. But anyway, the shape is hexagonal. But this, for demonstration purposes, hexagonally shaped homes like a boat like this, right?
Mhm.
Now, in the basement of the boat, of the hull of the house, are tanks. And these tanks all hold your water, your waste. They convert your waste into liquid fertilizer and methane gas. They hold your water for your pure water. They divide up your black water, your gray water for your garden, and they take care of all of your utilities. It's all in the hull of the boat. And it's all in the hull of so you have no cords, no lines, no umbilical cords going to the utility corporation. The utility corporation is right here. It's
And
right.
what is it? It collects rainwater? How do you get?
Yes, you collect rainwater. And yes, and there are all types of ways of doing all of that. And then your living facility is on this floor, on the main floor of the building.
Mhm.
And so you have in this case, I just have a main living, dining, kitchen right here, a bedroom, a single bedroom here, and a bathroom here. And up here, I have the greenhouse. I have the
Mhm.
this particular model, I made the greenhouse there.
The greenhouse is like on the roof.
In this particular model, I had it make it there. Yes,
Mhm.
in the upper level in
Okay.
the chamber. So, but everything is site specific and unique to the site. And so back to what is there. So there's gray water recycling, there's electrical storage, there's Lee wrote accretion created structure. So there you go. There's a thought for you, accretion. So accretion is a system that the Navy used to use. I don't know if I'm sure they still are, whereby they can put an electrical current on coral and it will make coral whatever shape you direct it to make.
Mhm.
So that's called accretion. So he said there accretion, it's an accretion created structure.
Hmm.
Recycled black water and hexagonal utility tanks. He says the hull is made of a conducting elements that produce power when salt water is passed through the material. I don't know what that is, but he said it, and you know what I know? Lee knew what to do. It's gonna be somebody I'm gonna find, just like I found the guy with basalt, just like I found Romeo with all the structural materials. There's gonna be a physicist today that knows what that is. And I don't know him yet, but he's gonna come to the table.
So you need that person, and then you're ready to go, pretty much. Like you got all
We
your.
could go even if we didn't have that person. We have
Okay.
all of the, all of,
So so as opposed to the circulating air from the previous rendition.
it still does that. It still does it.
Okay, so it still does that, but and what is the water? It's like floating on water. The whole house is floating on water.
Mhm.
Now, how does that? Why is that?
For a number of reasons, to make it hurricane proof,
Mhm.
earthquake proof, flood proof,
Wow,
to make it all of those things. And
interesting.
also, yeah, but that water is again, you could have it on an ocean or you could have it on a lake, but it also could be where you are, in a landlocked place as well. You just create that water jet.
Okay,
Yeah.
and what does it do? What does the water do? Oh, it prevents. You're saying from. And do you feel that, like in the house? Will you feel it moving?
Won't feel it unless there's a hurricane. But if there's a
Okay.
hurricane, instead of breaking apart,
Oh, wow.
it's going to go like this.
And have you shown this to physicists and people, and what do they say about this?
Find it interesting.
Hmm. But he's never built one, so we've never seen if this actually works.
Oh, we don't know this yet, but that doesn't mean we're not going to get it done.
Okay.
And I mean, these essentially could be the vehicles that Elon Musk is talking about putting on Mars, because they would enable that to happen. You could live anywhere, essentially. Now, there's also the site specificity of it. So we make the adaptations for the sites. So a person conceivably could do as much or as little as they wanted. So for example, right now, I was just in Indiana, and I just drew this out. My friend Nicole has a garage on her property. And so this is the garage right here. This is the building as it exists now with a carport here. And I added this, I drew this out and added this to make this a kitchen and to make this where all the stuff in her garage is going to go now. And this is right now an apartment upstairs, but it's in very bad shape. It's all just torn apart and it's nothing. It's really just a shell. But I'm going to encircle the whole thing in one of these structures, and I'm going to do what's called a retrofit. I'm going to keep the existing building and encircle it, but I'm not going to put the water element around it. That's going to be a little, at this stage, it's the building's already there. I'm just going to do what I can. I am going to excavate below and put in the gravity geothermal envelope and the hexagonal tanks that are going to enable it to have all of the utilities that it needs right on site, and the greenhouse all in the circulating building.
So the tanks, the hexagonal tanks is another like technology he invented?
Yes.
And what does that do? It separates the waters and the utilities and stuff?
Well, there would be tanks for water, there would be tanks for waste, that would be converted into a liquid fertilizer, that would be converted
automatically.
Not automatically, you have to do things, you have to heat it.
Okay.
Heated to change it into to make it into a liquid fertilizer. It also has to be contained. And like you've seen when you're driving down the highway and you see the waste hills that have the little taps on them.
Right.
That's methane gas that's produced all the waste. So the methane gas can be a useful cooking supply. It can be used to cook with.
Right.
And the fertilizer, the liquid fertilizer, to fertilize your garden. So all of that is possible, and it just depends on how much of adoption a person wants to do. But my intention is to build a community of prototype this and prototype a community as well. So we can deploy these to 23 locations globally. And I want to use the same system Lee used in his book. I want to do the same thing he did in this book, which was he got 23 reps nationwide who were going to be his reps and cause other houses of this nature to be built in their neighborhood. But what happened is the government shut it all down. That never happened. But that was the plan, and I think it's a good one. All I know is Lee knew what to do, and all I need to do is follow his instructions. All I am is a good servant, is a good steward. I'm a good steward of the work.
Well, I think the place to start is like, like a compound where people are willing to try this, right, with multiple other people on a property, because I couldn't see you putting this like in a busy neighborhood, right?
You conceivably could, but I agree with you. It would be too much of an anomaly. And what's happened in America now is that the building and planning and zoning restrictions would not allow it.
Right.
So, you'd have to there are counties in Tennessee and Kentucky and places like that where you could build it. Wow. But because, for example, about 8 years ago, a couple in Orlando had a garden in their front yard in Orlando, and they got tagged by the city for having a garden in their front yard.
Right.
And they fought it successfully, and they won. But we have laws that actually prevent people from having a garden in their front yard. And we have laws that prevent people from not having a traditional toilet. These are self-composting toilets. So we have laws that are preventing that. So we have to do a number of things. One is to become friends with all of our county commissioners and city commissioners and mayors and political officials so that they could see this as an asset as opposed to what are you doing? And the other thing is to build in places that aren't going to be so strict about it.
Mhm.
We have people in Mexico and the Philippines that are wanting to start these. And the kinds of things that you have to do in those countries, as opposed to your local officials, is you have to graft, you have to pay off people.
Right.
So there's always something, but you're going to
Right.
have to pay off some local officials to
But
allow.
yeah, it'd be great just to see one of these built.
Well, don't think I haven't been trying for 32.
Right, right, right.
But you know what? It's not until recently that people like you are interested.
Mhm.
For the last number of years,
Right.
most people have not been interested. People are too comfortable.
Right.
And Lee told me that no one would talk to him again until there was a disaster.
Well,
That
we're in a disaster now. People are getting very uncomfortable, and I think more people. I think a lot of people are very interested in this.
they are, and they haven't been before, but they
Mhm.
are now. And that's what Lee taught me. He said that people weren't interested in his thing till there was a perceived disaster.
Right.
And he said, when people are uncomfortable, but people are way too comfortable. In the 90s, the 80s and the 90s, people were very comfortable.
Right.
Starting in the 2000s, they started getting a little less comfortable, and now they're getting a little less comfortable.
Mhm.
And some people, that is. But the
Right.
fact of the matter is that what I say is that 3/4 of the earth does not have a shelter.
Mhm.
3/4 of humanity does not have a
Right.
shelter. They don't have food. They don't
Mhm.
have clean water. And I know, Jason, you're an empath and you're compassionate. And like myself, I know that we as human beings, without being conscious of this, the fact that one child is crying because they don't have water, food, or shelter is enough to make me cry and
Mhm.
enough to make me feel that we're not doing our job. And we can pretend all we want that we're comfortable, but we're not comfortable because there's one child crying. Maybe there's 10,000, maybe there's 10 million, maybe there's a billion, maybe there's 10 billion. But what
Right.
it is, we feel that, not
Mhm.
consciously, but we feel it. We know it. We
Mhm.
know that we're not serving our sisters and our brothers. And this is a way that we can do that. That we can make sure that everybody has comfort and safety.
Yeah, I like what you said. What Lee used to say. What was it like? Food, family, and community.
Food, family, shelter, food,
Shelter, right? Food, family, and shelter, right?
yeah. Mhm.
It's so true. It's like, we have all these fancy gadgets, but having, there's people in India, people in America on the streets. They don't even have a place to live, but they have a phone, you know.
Well, that was actually a revelation for me when I was in Peru and thinking about how to house every human on earth, as I do all the time. This is on my mind all the time. And I was in the poorest of the ghettos in Lima, accidentally.
I've been there too. I've been to the forest ghettos in Lima too. I know exactly what you're
It's
talking
called
about.
Rimac.
Yep, yep.
And so what I noticed in Rimac is that everybody was living in a cardboard box,
Hmm.
these cardboard homes, and there was a little hole in the backyard for the toilet, but everybody had a cell phone. Everybody had a computer or a cell phone. And for me, that's the teaching device. That's the device by which these people can live in these homes. Because in order to live in these homes, there are things that you must do to interact with nature and with the house itself. And in a way, that was the first thing that happened with these that was a problem. That was that once they were sold, people didn't know what to do with them because they didn't follow through with utilizing the principles of the envelope. People
Hmm.
must be taught, and it's like a living organism.
Hmm.
And if you're in a living organism that's responding to the external events and climate, you must respond to that. And there are ways that we have all the technology. We have everything at our fingertips. We can make this smart house with all the technological advances that does everything we wanted to do. But we want responsible homeowners. We want people that want to live in these homes and want to interact with the forces of nature that are coming our way, and that want to be responsible homeowners, that want to make sure that their gardens are flourishing, that want to make sure that the garden within the home is flourishing, that the waste tanks are taken care of, that everything works smoothly. We don't want that there won't be. And it takes a level of consciousness. It does take a level of consciousness.
Well, Jill, I mean, this is absolutely amazing, and it's amazing like the dedication you've had to this, and like many things, like this is what we need. And I don't think I don't know about trying to get everybody into it, but I definitely think we got to get
Yeah,
people into this, and
yeah.
then and that can be an example that people can come and see. And with the technology, we can make it go viral. We can get this out there, and then people will just start. But we got to start, I guess, with one, right? I guess that's your goal right now.
My goal is one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my goal has always been one.
Hmm.
And it feels like it's going to manifest. And people have told me, people we know have told me,
Hmm.
the funding is there for me. And I'm quite hopeful that that's the case. Who are you barking at? Do you want me to throw that for you? Yeah. Okay.
Well, let's actually wrap it up, and we'll continue again. There's a lot more to talk about, but yeah, we've given people a lot. This is an hour. Let's share this, and share with the right people, and yeah. Is there
Thank
anything else?
you.
If there's any links or anything you want to put into just send it to me, and
Okay, all right. Well, there's the Dolphin Dream, which is my website, and
okay.
Ekotecture website called Ekotecture. But if you put my name in the search engine,
Hmm.
load of stuff.
Okay, send me all that information. I'll put it in the description.
Yeah, if you put Jill Karlin, Karlin Butler in the search engine, you'll come up with loads of stuff. But what's funny is that there's a thing on the internet called the Wayback Machine, which
Hmm.
goes like back to the beginning of the internet. Guess who's there?
Yep, really.
Yeah, like just about around 19. I think the first Dolphin Dream stuff is in the early 90s. And Ekotecture maybe, I'm not sure, but some of it is there. And so thank you so much for taking the time. I always enjoy speaking with you. You're such a light, and you ask such interesting questions, and I love talking philosophy with you, and stimulating my mind. To me, that's like the most important thing. We're all about mind, and to be able to share these concepts, which, as you point out, are actually quite simple. And
Hmm.
he used to say that he would go to these solar conferences, and the nuclear physicists would sit there and argue with him ad nauseum. And he would go outside and he would show this concept to a 6-year-old, and they got it instantaneously.
Right, right.
And I think that speaks very well for anything. If this concept is simple, super simple, and graspable right away, there's some truth to that. And we all know it. We all know it in our, there's a book I'm reading which I talk about all the time, Charles Eisenstein. It's called The More Beautiful World We All Know Is Possible. I love that title so much. And that's what I say this is. That's what all my paintings that I've been doing for my entire life are about. The more beautiful world we all know is possible. And that's what we're here to create, the more beautiful world that we all know is possible. And that's what Ekotecture portends, all of that. A world, I say that it's foundational for peace on earth. And why is it foundational for peace on earth? Because if people don't have this relationship with the earth, in which they respect and honor the earth, and in which they're not depleting the earth, and in which they have a home and all of their neighbors have a home and have shelter and have food and have clean water, all of the essentials are taken care of. What's that for us? What that means is that we are going to be able to elevate ourselves to do what? Create art,
Hmm.
beauty, music,
Hmm.
dance, theater.
Again, it's like goes back to the simple things. Like we have all this artificial food, but like we can't recreate a strawberry, like a fresh grown, strawberry. And we can have all this social media, but it can't recreate real human connection. It's just like, again, it goes back to that simplicity. You know, what we want is free, it's there, but don't underestimate how long this like system has been around that has made us miserable. So that's why I think we got to start with a small group of people, you
I
know.
agree. Well, it has to be, and that's what we're doing. And it has to, that's what Margaret Mead said. Never underestimate what a small group of, how is the earth, how has the world ever been changed by a small group of committed individuals,
Mhm.
something like that,
Mhm.
committed individuals. And yes, it is going to take that, but it may be happening simultaneous. That's why I have this vision of the locations globally.
Mhm.
I've been planting seeds for all of these years, all over the world. And I have people in many different places who are really interested in this and sort of waiting for,
I feel the same way. I mean, I've been kind of seeing things for 20 years now, 15 years, like, and every year it's getting stronger, stronger and stronger. And I think maybe the time has come. This is going to be a strange year. You could already feel it. And the AI is such going to be a game changer for everything we know. It's going to be a bigger change than the Industrial Revolution.
yeah.
So I think between that and all, we're going to be facing just existential crisis. What does life look like if we don't have to work? And I think a lot of our like, I think I'm hopeful that our dreams, will come true, or will, like our what we've been working on all this time, and I've wanted to quit so many times, just go off and be a monk, and like it's just no point. And I've stuck with it somehow, and I feel like we're getting to that point where it's going to get that bad in some ways, and also we're going to have access to resources and technology that we've never dreamed of. I think it's the time. I think it's this year. I really do. Or 2025. I think that's the year.
Yeah, I think AI is going to be essential in the creation of these things as well. So yes, I totally agree with you. It is, we're due for a paradigm shift.
Hmm.
And
Oh yeah,
other things,
overdue.
yeah, and other things that Lee has, he's talked about are things like even just like crazy drawings about like structural things and how the earth is wobbling and how in this era right now it's going to shift a degree or two. I mean, he was plugged into the cosmos and about about how it all is changing, and he has like he talks about it in terms of physics, so that the earth is actually going to shift a little bit on its axis, so and that will change things too.
Well, can you send me a picture of him? We could put it in the
I
the
will,
thumbnail.
yeah, I'd love to do that.
All right. Well, I'll stop the recording, but thank you so much.
Oh, good. Did you stop it?
I'm stopping it right now. Just say goodbye to
Bye
the
bye.
audience.